What's up, y'all? It's Left Fresh Podcast. Hope you all having a great Memorial Day weekend. Happy Saturday. You're on for the first time. I want to encourage you to subscribe, like, comment, share, tell a friend to tell a friend. Like I said, thank you all for jumping on. Hope you all having a great weekend. Um, Hope I'm having a great one myself. Getting through this hip hop episode for you all. Getting it all ready for you. Like I said, catch me at 10 o'clock this time every Saturday doing the hip hop. On Wednesdays, you can catch me on doing the sports on Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Catch me on Instagram at This Is Left Fresh. And catch me on TikTok at This Is Left Fresh. Having a good weekend right now. Hope you all having a great one as well. Like I said, came across some good hip hop discussions and everything that arose is basically just looking at different content and everything like that. And a lot of things I normally would just dismiss as clickbait, but I found a bit of clickbait that a lot of people are talking about, a little bit outraged about, and I felt like I can use this to segue into a good discussion of um, modern of the mixtape culture in the mid 2000s, maybe late 90s, a little bit, as well as um, you know discuss who had some of the great runs in both regions, East Coast, down South, particularly. And I got that from, like I said, a bit of clickbait that was that was done on Gilly the Kid and Wallow's podcast, $1 million worth of game. They had French Montana and Max B make an appearance on there. They did an interview with them and everything. And they asked Max B about, where you feel like he resides in the game. And for backstory, I'm pretty sure that the mainstream masses don't necessarily know who Max B is. You more likely have to be tapped into hip hop to really know who Max B is, let alone be up on his music. And even further, he had a good fan base. He had a good following before he went to prison. 18 years. He was convicted of conspiracy to murder. Did 18 years. He was just released from prison early this year. So he's kind of just been everywhere as far as online, doing a lot of podcasts, speaking, making appearances. He's had some pretty big appearances as well. Like, a lot of his music is still revered by the fan base that he had before he went to prison. So, and people really want to know Max B. Max B is a guy who just kind of says anything and just, you know, doesn't really mean any harm by it. Um, so basically, long story short, getting into the podcast with Gilly and Wallow, Max B in one of the excerpts from it said that he belongs after Biggie, Jay Z, and Nas on New York's top rappers list. He was asked, where does he reside as one of the top rappers in New York, and it's a controversial statement to say the least. He Because Max B really doesn't have a studio album. Most of his career was basically kind of on a mixtape. He did some background work, before he was incarcerated. Um, a lot of people don't. A lot of people should remember his stint with Diplomats and Dipset with Jim Jones. You know, infamously having a falling out with him and everything like that. He did work with them first, then he went on his own mixtape wave, and he was incarcerated abruptly after that. Like right before 2010, around 2010, he did 18. He did a few years. Um, Came out 2026. So yeah, 18 years. He went to prison in 2008. Yeah. So yeah, Max B did a lot of time. Um, Throughout his time in prison, he still had support, still had fan base that listened to his music, his archive mixtape music. Like I said, never really got a real chance to break out, even if he, not saying if he could or would or anything like that if he wasn't incarcerated, but just didn't have that chance. He did have a brief run of mixtapes that was undeniable. As far as regional success in New York and the East Coast, Max B did have a fan base and a following of people that did like his music. So, but yeah, this is nevertheless a bold claim. Uh, I'm pretty sure that many would disagree as well. So, I mean, I think most would disagree that he's on a tier with Biggie, Jay Z, and Nas. That's as pretty much as big as it gets in New York. But I mean, hey, you got to admire the confidence. You know, if you don't believe in yourself, nobody else will. Um, but that's not really what led to the outrage. I think a lot of people kind of shrugged this off and just laughed at it, like, you know, that's how you feel, that's how you feel, and just disagree and move on. But when Wallow started talking about all the other great artists that came from New York and the ones that are still doing it at this age, he got the Big Daddy Kane, and Max B just kind of just stopped in outrage that he would even mention Big Daddy Kane as far as still going. Um, and then it said, I haven't heard from Kane since '97. You know what I mean? And it's kind of a wild thing to say too, because I've heard Kane since '97. I mean, it's not exactly albums, anything like that, but it's probably just as much as music as Max B has made since 1997. So, but that was a wild take, and then everybody kind of laughed at it and everything. But the internet reacted, a lot of hip hop purists and OGs reacted, and basically like you can't disrespect an OG. They felt disrespected for Kane and everything like that. You can't just, and everybody just kind of spoke out like, hey, you got to slow your roll, you got to be humble, just different responses of that nature and everything like that. And I understand it. You pay respect, you pay homage to those who paved the way before you and everything, just of that nature as well. But that wasn't even what bothered me. It was just inaccurate. Just flat out inaccurate. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm somebody who actually listens to Max B's music, and I have some songs that I actually like from Max, a good wave of songs that I like from Max B. And even though Big Daddy Kane dropped about six albums, um, he's pretty much known for his first two that was released in the late '80s. The '90s wasn't necessarily, I wouldn't say, um, as great as the first two albums right here, Long Live the Kane and It's a Big Daddy Thing. These two albums right here are what most people revere when they talk about Big Daddy Kane. The '90s, he still made albums, but it wasn't the same effect as those. But yeah, he made six albums. Um, Top of his game. He was one of the best in the game, as part of quote unquote the golden era with Rakim and KRS-One, and you know I understand Wallow shouting him out, and I understand a lot of the younger generation not just giving Big Daddy Kane, like, understanding the real impact of Big Daddy Kane. And Max B himself, that was a lapse in judgment, because if you look at Max B's list of, well, the three guys that are ahead of him, I can tell you right now about three of them, certainly, if not definitely one of them was influenced by Big Daddy Kane, namely one, Jay-Z. I mean, this is the dude that was under Big Daddy Kane wing starting out, of course, with Jazz Ode and Big Daddy Kane. Those were like two OG mentor types to Jay-Z coming up. And, not saying you wouldn't have Jay-Z if it wasn't for Kane, but this is why you don't really speak on like OGs, especially these golden era OGs. You don't say anything about Kane, KRS, Cool G, um, Chuck D. I mean, certain artists is like, those late '80s KRS-One, those artists you don't say anything about. You don't say anything to that effect, because what they did, and they weren't the pioneers, of course. Like, hip hop has been around. Hip hop was around by maybe 10, 15 years before they emerged. But those artists, those quote unquote era artists, those late '80s, early '90s artists, that were like pillars in New York City rap. They quote unquote raised the bar of lyricism. And like all the real lyricists that aspire to be great lyrically, uh, it inspired to be on their level. And it isn't always with record sales, it isn't always with shows, it isn't always with not even just complete albums, even. I mean, like I said, Kane had four albums that, many wouldn't really appreciate, especially not as much as these two right here. And even it may sound dated to a lot of the younger generation, but you think about at this time, like, before you got to a Jay-Z, a Nas, and, the artists that Max B put over him, you had a Big Daddy Kane, you had a Rakim, you had a KRS-One. Those are the ones who paved the way before them. So it's like, I understand Max B's a competitive artist. And like I said, I still don't think he had a run like Big Daddy Kane in the late '80s. Like Big Daddy Kane in the late '80s was huge. Like I said, with Rakim and all of them different artists and like that. Yeah, you're not, you know, you scale your time to their time. Like, you don't just compare, the crowd ovation you get at a show in 2026 and expect Big Daddy Kane to do the same thing. No, no, go back to the 80s, and see what type of reception Big Daddy Kane was getting. Big Daddy Kane was getting, plenty love. You know what I mean? Like I said, some of the greatest MCs in history looked up to Kane, looked up, the KRS, looked up the, you know, Rakim, Cool G Rap, like those artists right there are pretty much like keep your name out your mouth. You know what I mean? Because you're gonna have some OGs and some purists really coming for you, and when they do come for you, they're gonna say things like, with Max B, like what album Max B really had, what project Max B has really done to even speak that highly. You know what I mean? Like we admire the confidence, and like I said, I can say realistically, Max B has never ascended to a type of fame to ever make that notion about Big Daddy Kane. But I can also admit that, hey, Max B did have a mixtape run. And I know it sounds like, oh man, like see what I'm saying? But listen, the thing about mixtapes is that it serves a very, very, very variety of purpose. It serves a strong variety of purposes. Like, yeah, I know you could take a mixtape for granted, especially when somebody's making studio albums, making classic studio albums. And then they can look down at your little mixtape and like, oh yeah, that mixtape, your little mixtape stuff is cute. We see mixtape artists get mocked all the time. However, mixtapes can serve a variety of purposes. Like I said, number one, it can definitely get an artist that's trying to get it out the mud. It can get them through the door. It can get them signed. It can get an established artist audience. It can get the audience of an established artist ready for a upcoming studio album. You can release mixtapes that get the audience ready for the studio album as an established artist. You can be an aspiring artist and use the mixtape, use the mixtape circuit as a way to rise. This was the formula in the late 90s and the early 2000s, and some of the greatest artists in hip hop have done it that way. So, I mean, like, it's not that I mean, hey, Max B was just a mixtape artist. I mean, yeah, he was a mixtape artist, and his mixtapes was actually getting a little bit of buzz as well regionally. And that was also a difference back in those 2000s period, where it's like in the 2000s you kind of had to get it out the mud the old school way, the regional way. There was no streaming era and everything. You can't just put your music on a streaming platform, and the audience from all over the place can just come across your music through word of mouth. No, no, no. You had to really almost trunk in your car, sell it out of local markets and mixtape shops, especially in New York City. Like there was mixtape shops 3 for $10, and then when the hip hop scene emerged in Atlanta, it really started expanding. In the Atlanta area, it was the same thing. You had mixtapes out of gas stations and everything. Just certain artists is just flooding the mixtape circuit. You know what I mean? And it was like it got a lot of artists through the door. Got a lot of artists on, and it got a lot of artists built anticipation for a studio album. And we've heard some mixtapes that people will play before they heard a studio album. And it's different formats. It might be original songs, it might be throwaway songs, maybe songs that artist may have jacked another artist's beat. It's different things. It's like almost anything goes on a mixtape circuit. And a lot of artists really got a chance to display their overall talents, free of any type of label restrictions and anything about what they could say or do, say on the mixtape and everything like that, or what direction, artistic creativity. A lot of times you can just, throw a variety of just good songs on there and just, like I said, build up the anticipation with the audience. So yeah, like I said, Max B was just another one. And he was actually kind of the later wave, because here's my thing about mixtapes. Like I said, that was the purest mixtape era. Now with the streaming era, the mixtape, mixtapes don't really have the same feel to it anymore. It's like, the way albums come out, the way mixtapes it all comes out like the same way sometimes. And, how short an album can be, or type of direction, a lot of albums really just a lot of scattered hits these days. And a lot of albums kind of feel like mixtapes, or mixtapes started feeling like albums like in the 2010s. But in that late 90s, you kind of got that ground floor, that next up and coming artist who's about to make a buzz, who's about to make something happen. Sometimes an artist, you know, have you thinking like they about to be the next guy up when you hear him on the mixtapes, and then it just didn't translate into studio success. In Max B's case, incarceration is what limited him. I'm not sure what his ceiling would have been, as an artist, if he would have made it through the door or not. But I know incarceration derailed all of that. But he did go on a mixtape run that many recognize before incarceration, and it's just four of them right here. You know what I mean? Like Max B in the late 2000s, like once he broke loose and fell out with Dipset, Bird Gang, and Jim Jones and everything, he went on his own run. Gang Green, um, projects with French Montana, Coke Wave, Goon Music, Million Dollar Baby. That's just four of them. I mean, he really went on a big wave of releasing a lot of music in a short period of time before he was incarcerated. Like I want to say from almost like a year and a half worth of time. I mean, he was in prison, like sitting in prison, and it was still like unreleased Max B songs being dropped by different DJs and everything. It was like almost a couple of years of new Max B music. That was one of the things about a mixtape wave is like, I'm going through some of the best mixtape waves that we had, some of the best mixtapes of our time. And as I look back on them, I see the volume, the work ethic of some, and then some mixtape projects is just as good as a studio album. You know what I mean? That's kind of like a metric for a great mixtape run. Is like you either dropped a great wave of mixtapes, a big wave of mixtapes, and some of them, I'm not gonna lie to you. Some of them songs are throwaway songs. Some of them songs you could just throw those away. You're not going to revisit, But when you drop a big wave of them, it's hard to make every last one of them hot. And then, like I said, it's hard to pass up on all those songs too. Some of them you're going to actually like, even if you're not the biggest fan of them. You still might come across a song or two that you may like. But yeah, Max B, like I said, in a short period of time, from the fallout with Dipset to doing his own thing, to incarceration. I want to say like I said, maybe '07 to '09. I mean, several mixtapes. I mean, I want to say over 20, 30 of those mixtapes. I mean, you can kind of go back through and look through his collection if you want to. You can look at these right here that I got put up. Go back through these. But yeah, Max B, the later end too. He's like one of the last of the mixtape waves in New York City. You know what I mean? Like I'm gonna make my way down south to Atlanta in a minute, but yeah, those two cities, Atlanta and New York, had a big, strong mixtape circuit from the late '90s throughout the 2000s, which was to me like the biggest boom in the mixtapes. Like I said, it was the internet starting to come through. Thatpiff.com, gas station mixtapes, mixtape stores in New York City. I mean, from city to city, I can tell you right now, there was like a big boom in mixtape circuit, just bubbling all, from city to city. And from that time period, like I said, it was probably as late as 97, 98, all the way up to about the 2010s. And then, like I said, and once things got to the streaming era and digital and everything like that, it kind of mixtapes kind of lost its feel. But these were when you had to go to a record store and get a DVD, get a CD. You would get a mixtape, on a disc, like a $10 one. And then you would get maybe a mixtape DVD, like Smack DVD or something like that. That was kind of like your music fix in between albums and everything too. But yeah, Max B was just like I said, one of the later examples. I'm gonna go back to a previous example. I'm gonna go back to the tree that Max B was a branch from, and that is Dipset. Yeah, Dipset was one of the defining New York City artists as far as the mixtape circuit was concerned. They were also artists. Cameron was pretty much the major artist. Joel Santana and Jim Jones were other artists, with the other two artists that eventually broke out and had studio music, the studio albums that were released, mainstream success. But there was more to Dipset than just them. I mean, they had a whole array of different artists. Like I always say, Cameron in the 2000s was kind of like Master P in New York. I mean, he was signing almost everybody in Uptown and Harlem, from A Mafia to J.R. Ryder to, the 40 Cal to, you know, Uncasa, Hell Rel. I mean, yeah, I mean, it was just a whole bunch of different background artists, all on the mixtapes, all on the features. Um, yeah, they definitely. he definitely Cameron definitely set off the mixtape circuit with Dipset like an army behind him. You know what I mean? They just dropped a wave of mixtape music throughout the throughout the early 2000s, throughout the mid 2000s. I mean, it was that period. I want to say 2001, like when Cameron first signed to Rockefeller. Dipset was all over the place. It was all over the mixtape circuit. It was dropping mixtapes like almost. It felt like weekly. They were dropping mixtapes, or it was just random freestyles, throwaway verses. Jacking beats, just displaying the talent. Had the younger talent, like I said, J.R. Ryder was giving out verses and everything. A Mafia, they used to go on the radio station and just spit verses and ciphers and everything like that. Like a lot of the stuff we see online on the radar. Um, all these different platforms that display artists playing their music. Yeah, this was like the blueprint. You know what I mean? This was the blueprint for displaying their work. They were all on Smack DVD. Dipset was heavy on Smack DVD as well. So yeah, Dipset definitely gets their flowers for you know, one of those I want to say I don't want to say underground because Cameron was like I said, he was on the rock, but they definitely was lighting up the underground and the mixtape circuit at that time. Like I said, old school mixtape. You see the covers right there. You used to get those. You used to have a CD, and you used to have to switch them out and put them in your car. That's real old. You know what I mean? The old school CD deck. But yeah, Dipset definitely one of those as far as mixtape movements, especially in New York, 2000s at that peak period. Another artist who pretty much set the standard for mixtape ascension to superstardom. Can't look no further than Curtis Jackson, 50 Cent, and G Unit. I want to include Tony Yayo and Lloyd Banks and Young Buck. G Unit came out together, especially with 50 Cent leading the pack. He was one of the first to get it going, and with like I said, G Unit to follow him. Guess Who's Back, Power of a Dollar, those type of mixtapes that 50 would drop. Basically $5 mixtapes. He was one of the OGs. This is one that kind of goes back to, like I said, late 90s, 98, 99. 50 Cent before he was shot. Before he got signed to Dr. Dre, before Eminem and everything like that, he was dropping mixtapes in the street. DJ Clue was playing songs off his mixtapes. All the DJs, DJ Who Kid. I mean, that was the big thing about the mixtapes was the DJs. We got to shout out DJ Clue. Got to shout out DJ K Slay, rest in peace. Shout out Who Kid. All the mixtape DJs. I'm gonna come back and go back through those as well. DJ Drama, shout out to him as well. We'll get into that a little later as well. I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna have to do an episode on the best DJ mix on the mixtapes as well. They need their own segment because they really were the suppliers of hip hop that kind of like the unsung heroes, if anything else. You know what I mean? But yeah, 50 Cent, you know, and it wasn't. It's almost like it didn't. He didn't drop a big wave of mixtapes, but the ones he dropped were potent. And I mean, in essence, I feel like it got him signed. Like I feel like that it got him that these two mixtapes, particularly right here, got 50 Cent signed. And honestly, the songs on there were so structured and well put out, and um, it showed 50's ability to make songs, and that's why so many labels wanted to sign 50. This is why 50 held out because he knew he was worth it. Dr. Dre and Eminem came with a great offer, and the rest is history. But yeah, 50, he went on a mixtape run. It was a short one, and it didn't need much because the songs he put on these projects right here were pretty much indicative of his actual studio albums as well. Like 50 takes his time putting a project together, does the hooks, rapping the verses and everything like that. Just gave you solid songs on the mixtape circuit. A lot of artists. He gave you some couple freestyles too, but he actually gave you actual proof that he can actually get in the booth and actually make a song and make a complete studio album just off these projects right here. And he's like I said, one of the defining artists of making your ascension to superstardom from the mixtape circuit. Like, so many other artists scratching and climbing at the mixtape circuit, trying to separate themselves from the pack. 50 Cent, like many others, tried to do his thing the mixtape way, and it worked to the utmost. I mean, 50 Cent was performing mixtape songs, globally. Barcelona performing songs like Ghetto Quran. Like I said, he had a global buzz before he even got to Dr. Dre, which is why, it was almost a no-brainer for Dre and Eminem to sign him because, signing 50 Cent at that point, just if he was that successful off mixtape, he was pretty much a gold mine. And plus the image and everything like that. So yeah, 50 Cent, like I said, one of those East Coast mixtape sensations that took off. And I'm gonna take you on to another artist that went on this steady mixtape run, nice volume of mixtapes in the mid 2000s, kind of like in between his run, a little after, even after his, the early years of his career, in the middle of his run, he just went on this crazy mixtape tear. My man Styles P from D Block, The Locks, um, Jada Kiss, he, Jada Kiss, Styles, Sheik, they all did it. They all did a mixtape. They've all had mixtapes, but Styles P's mixtapes raised a lot of eyebrows in the mid 2000s. A lot of eyebrows. Like, we all know them from The Locks. We all know them from Bad Boy. We all know them from Rough Riders. We all know them from, their group and their solo albums, Jada Kiss and, what I'm saying, Styles P's solo albums as well. But there was this period, like, after Rough Riders, and it was like, 2005 to 2007 period where Styles P just went crazy on the mixtapes. And, it was like, it was like I said, normally he's that guy, some people try to look at him as the middle guy in The Locks, between Jada and Sheik and everything like that, just, a member. But there was just this one period in the mixtapes. And like I said, New York really needed it at that time because there wasn't really, it was kind of like I almost felt like a little dry spell in that mid to late 2000s in New York. There wasn't really any classic albums dropping. Um, a couple of artists try to break through, didn't have much longevity, and it relied on a lot of the veterans. New York relied on a lot of the veterans to keep things going. And Styles P put on a veteran performance. I mean, this was like, if y'all follow basketball, this is like Kawhi Leonard this past season. I mean, Styles P in his later years, like releasing these type of this quantity of quality. Pardon me. You know what I mean? Like he dropped a good quantity of quality projects just on a mixtape circuit, from the Ghost in the Shell, the Ghost in the Machine, Independence. He did a DJ Drama project there as well. You know, Styles P definitely, went on a run that in that middle 2000s period, almost kind of like didn't really expect it. Like, as great as he is, I always like Styles P's projects, but I did not see that coming. Like, especially like I said, in a period where it's like, yeah, there was still New York, there was still good New York artists that was flying under the radar, but yeah, this was particularly a period that flew under the radar in a period where the regional dominance of down south rap and it was at its peak. Um, you know, West Coast, Game had a little bit of the West Coast. You still had artists, still had a veteran artists making new music, but then you didn't have too many the younger artists trying to break out. It was kind of a dry spell in New York, and Styles P kind of lit up the mixtape circuit and gave the true East Coast hip hop fans a lot to listen to during that period right there. Though Styles P was definitely giving us hip hop in that period. But last New York or East Coast mixtape run before we make our way down south. Fabulous. Yeah, Fab. Another one. And it goes further and it goes back, to the late 90s with Fabulous as well, from the DJ Clue mixtapes. DJ Clue mixtapes, Fabulous would be the first track and he'd be freestyling over an already established artist's beat. And he would rip it with these punchlines. I already talked about the Lloyd Banks Fabulous debate a couple episodes ago. Fabulous was lacing punchlines all through somebody else's beat for the later part of the 90s, went into the 2000s doing his own studio albums. And, a lot of his studio albums, if you like me, B-sides are not really something I always remember. And it's mostly like the radio hits for the ladies on the studio albums. But mixtape Fab is kind of like that relief from those studio albums where he would just give you straight bars. The Fabulous that's kind of like, to me, off the leash kind of, you really get to see what type of beast Fab really is lyrically. And, particularly in that mid 2000s period, DJ Clue hosted the Loso's Way Rise to Power mixtape at the top left. But, this wasn't just a DJ Clue mixtape where, he would have a variety of artists, and Fabulous would be the one to start off the mixtape with a freestyle. This was Fabulous' own personal mixtape. And in that mid 2000s toward the late 2000s, you seen Fabulous kind of join that, Styles P wave of mixtapes that New York needed, basically. Um, More Street Dreams came out a little earlier. It was like 2003 in the 2000s, but yeah, that was another one with another great bunch of great punchlines. He rapped over the Renegade beat, Jay Z's Renegade beat. Like I said, for example, he rapped over a couple other established artists' beats on that More Street Dreams. He did a project with DJ Drama as well, and the Soul Tape, of course. He did 1, 2, and 3. The DJ Drama editions as well. He had like 3 editions of that as well. So yeah, Fabulous. He had a long wave of attacking mixtapes and either doing a couple of tracks, a couple jacking for beats on DJ Clues, or just doing his own mixtape, doing his own personal mixtapes. So yeah, I definitely, when you look at those top New York City, East Coast mixtape runs, yeah, you're definitely looking at Dipset, you're looking at G Unit, you're looking at the Locks and Styles P particularly, and then you're looking at Fabulous as well. Those are those are pretty much the top most notable East Coast New York City mixtape runs in the 2000s, right there for me. Um, Definitely appreciated that. But yeah, y'all just jumping on, man. I want to encourage you to subscribe, like, comment, share, tell a friend, tell a friend. It's the Left Fresh Podcast, Saturday Night Live Hip Hop Edition. Y'all can check me out at 10 o'clock this time, Saturdays, discussing hip hop. You can catch me on Wednesdays, 9 o'clock, discussing sports, discussing the NBA particularly, sometimes WWE, NFL, anything sports related, 9 p.m. on Wednesdays. Catch me on Instagram at This Is Left Fresh. Catch me on TikTok at This Is Left Fresh as well. Like I said, hope you all enjoying your Memorial Day weekend. Thanks for jumping on with me. I'm going to switch over into the best Southern mixtape runs. And, one of the DJs that to me kind of spearheaded that 2000s run. And one of the things about the South mixtape runs was that it really pushed the door. It really pushed the envelope of how dominant the South was in that in that late 2000s. In that mid to late 2000s, it was like complete Southern dominance at that point because you know on top of the songs that was getting people in the clubs lit, dancing, the dance songs and everything, the songs that were topping the billboards and everything like that, the Lil Johns and the party songs and everything like that. You also had solid artists dropping mixtapes and releasing a big wave of them, signature mixtapes, and it's mixtapes that segued into their studio albums. That's pretty much one of the key things with me is how many of these mixtapes actually led to built the anticipation and led to albums that were highly anticipated and did extremely well. It was kind of like a stepping stone to them, or just like I said, the prep up for those albums. A lot of Southern mixtape art, a lot of Southern artists, legendary artists in the 2000s used the mixtape formula and it paid off big dividends for them. And look no further than Ti. Ti's run, with the 5 albums from I'm Serious to Trap Music to Urban Legend to King, Ti versus Tip to Paper Trail. That run from about 2001, 2002 all the way up to 2007. In between those albums, he had these mixtapes, and I'm not sure. I gotta look back, but I'm pretty sure, I'm certain that he was probably the first Southern artist to work with DJ Drama. DJ Drama is from Philly. DJ Drama was a Philadelphia DJ, was a Philadelphia native, and he was a DJ. You know, he worked with a lot of East Coast artists, as I've shown you with DJ Drama. He worked with Styles P, worked with Fabulous, he worked with a lot of East Coast artists. But DJ Drama ventured down south. Of course, you had DJ Scream. Of course, you had all the other DJs that was down here in Atlanta too. No disrespect to them, but when Atlanta really started pushing to the forefront, DJ Drama was right there with the Gangsta Grills editions, really pushing these artists' name in the street as well, where they were dropping albums and they were dropping mixtapes. I mean, good mixtapes too, memorable mixtapes. Dare I say classic? I dare to say it too. TI, PSC, in the street mixtapes. Had a big run. In between albums, like I said, he had I'm Serious, he had trap music, but these gangster grills in the in the streets, you know, when T.I. was hot, a lot of that came from the mixtape. Down with the King, going that little flip. T.I. used the mixtape to catalog his, to catapult his catalog. You know what I mean? Like when you think about his catalog, you know, no sleep on the mixtapes, man. Ti definitely was one of the first to work with Drama. Definitely to get his name through the door. On his own, of course, on his own accord. But then with Drama, it kind of just accelerated everything because it really just captured the street. And then while we talking about the streets, DJ Drama, after, shortly after Ti, found another artist to catapult, Young Jeezy. Trap or Die is probably still one of the greatest Southern mixtapes known to man. Even when you revisit, when you look at the songs, how it prepped up for Thug Motivation 101, the anticipation behind it, the mixtape itself. It was almost like a 50 Cent type of feel down south, the way he took everything. Like everybody was on Jeezy. Everybody. It felt like that's how it felt everywhere. Everybody was rocking with Jeezy at that point. Boys in the Hood, Snowman t-shirts. Jeezy really had everything in a chokehold at that time. And it was crazy because T.I. was still hot. T.I. was still at the top, you know what I mean? But you had Jeezy. It was like, people were loving Jeezy at the same time. It was like, Jeezy at this point, 2003, 2004, 2005, and then he came back with Can't Ban the Snowman. Um, this really accelerated, Trap or Die accelerated Jeezy. If this was the streaming era, this mixtape would have everything on fire right now. The way people were running to get DVDs. People were popping DVDs. Real disc inside a disc player, having this bumping at a max. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this would probably be one of the most heavily streamed mixtapes ever, I think, in today's game right now. In today's world right now, Trap or Die, if they had a streaming era back then, the streams would be through the roof. Can't Ban a Snowman, anticipation from Trap or Die would make Can't Ban the Snowman go through the roof as well. But yeah, that's T.I., like Jeezy, DJ Drama, like I said, he was everywhere. T.I., Jeezy, and then, of course, Lil Wayne. Mixtape Wheezy is like a phrase in the hip hop dictionary. Like everybody knows about mixtape Wheezy. Like I said, this is kind of the transition point. Lil Wayne was kind of at a point where mixtapes were really starting to be looked at as albums. Especially on the wave and the run he went on. This is probably the most exemplary of work ethic as far as an artist. Like Lil Wayne flooded the streets with mixtape after mixtape after mixtape, feature after feature after feature. Lil Wayne's run was so much volume in so little time. Like you almost worried, like, is he going to get burnt out? You know what I mean? He was just pushing it to the max. You know what I mean? Song after song, feature after feature, freestyle after freestyle, dedication, no ceilings. Dedication and Drought are the crown jewels of Lil Wayne's catalog in a mixtape. I know we got the Carters, but controversial opinion. I think, many people will kind of revert back to the Droughts and the dedications just as fast as they would go to the Carters, if not faster. Me, I probably would go to the mixtape myself. The Drought and Dedication to me was peak lyricism by Lil Wayne. This was, you remember Lil Wayne, of course, with the Hot Boy years, and then the years right after the Hot Boys broke up, you started seeing Lil Wayne turn a corner. He started becoming a student of the game. Next thing you know, he chilling out in New York. He hanging with Dipset, and then he just caught fire. He caught fire. And then he lit up Young Money, and then he just went on this wave that one of the highest peaks in hip hop. It's crazy. He was at one of the highest peaks in hip hop through the mixtapes. He had mixtape. The fact that he was dropping, the Carter 2, Carter 3, that period was the hottest period of Lil Wayne's. That was that peak Lil Wayne. Between Carter 2, between Carter 2 and between Carter 3. Those two albums right there was that mixtape Wheezy run where he was just on a different level. Everywhere he went, you know, he just touched everything he touched went to flames. You know what I mean? So yeah, Lil Wayne, salute to him. You know what I mean? One of the artists that personified down south mixtape era, and it's going to transition to another artist with a great work ethic. Many agree to disagree about how good he is and everything like that. Maybe it's always kind of a never an objective opinion, but Gucci Mane can't deny the work ethic. Gucci Mane will flood the streets, mixtape after mixtape. I mean, different editions, different part twos, part sixes. I mean, Wilt Chamberlain's, all type of this. Mr. Zone 6, Kitchen Talk, Chicken Talk. Gucci Mane flooded the mixtape circuit in a way. I remember everybody talks about the run No Limit had dropping all the albums. Gucci Mane might have that beat as far as just release mixtapes. Like I said, when it come to gas station mixtapes, you go to the gas station and he had a CD. It was a Gucci Mane CD. Gucci had every gas station, on every Shell station you could think of had a Gucci Mane mixtape in it, and he had a cult like following too. Like I said, no matter how you feel about Gucci, there's a fan base out there that rocked with Gucci. I know recent news, you know, they be affecting this segment right here, but hey, we're not going to just revise history and act like half of everybody wanted to be Gucci, half the people that was influenced by Gucci. The amount of people that's disappointed by Gucci after all this Pooh Shiesty stuff shows you how much Gucci impacted everyone with his mixtape run. You know what I mean? And it transcended regions because at this point it was pretty much online. Mixtapes were pretty much online at this point. You know what I mean? And in the mixtape and the internet, in the hood DVDs, Gucci Mane image was so popular with people. Like I said, it's crazy to say this now, looking back, looking at it now, but looking back at it, yeah, Gucci had the internet in a chokehold. You know, had the streets, the gas stations, everything on, just everywhere. Gucci was everywhere. From, like I said, the internet, the gas stations, the mixtape circuit. Gucci Mane in the late 2000s, I mean, the mid 2000s, the late 2000s, all the way in the 2010s, even. Just went on this mixtape run that was just like I said, a phenomenal display of work ethic. Like I said, whether you agree with the quality or not, that's on you. But you couldn't deny that you couldn't deny that he was working. And the last artist down here to make a run from mixtape to ascension to mainstream success, Future. Future, Dirty Sprite, Streets Calling, Astronaut Status. Future was to me the turn of the decade. You know what I mean? He was the turn of the decade. Literally the end of the 90s, walking into 2010s. Future and his style, cadence, all the different artists that, Future's influence. I don't care how people say that sound different from Future and everything. It's all kind of, and not all kind of a variation, but it's different variations of what Future pretty much laid down for the mixtape, through the mixtape. The sound, the beat selection, the hooks. Yeah, Future, was pretty much one of the last of the mixtape artists down south to really and then to just take it to a whole nother level. You can't deny what he did. You know, like I said, whether you agree with the quality or not and everything, whatever stance you have on Future. But another one, he dropped pivotal mixtapes that turned into album success, him being everywhere, being on everybody's hooks. He's been on a one thing I saw the other day was that he's been on a song with Kendrick, Drake, and J. Cole throughout the whole beat because Future kind of transcends hip hop to where he can just almost jump on a track with anybody and it works. You know, like I said, most people won't look at him as a lyrical wordsmith, anything like that, but what he does to the song, people can't deny it. And like I said, when it comes to his movement and his popularity, regionally, getting it started regionally and then transcending to where he's at now, like globally. Yeah, Future took a big stride and a big step and a big jump from the mixtape circuit to pretty much superstardom. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, these are prime examples of artists that use the mixtape circuit to catapult themselves, to accelerate their success, and become the stars that they are. And like I said, a lot of their mixtape music still gets revisited to this day. If you forgot about it, this is a good time to probably jump on it, catch up. If you never heard of it somehow, some way, by all means, go ahead and do some exploring. Um, but yeah, these are artists that all went on mixtape runs. Some didn't experience the most commercial success. Some went to all new heights. But what they did on that underground slash mixtape circuit right there was definitely cannot be denied. And definitely was East Coast down south. It's kind of the same formula, especially in that 2000s period. And like I said, those are the artists that it paid dividends for. Last segment of the night. This is going to be the first one. And before I do it, if you just jumped on somehow, caught the last of it, subscribe, like, comment, share, tell a friend to tell a friend. Um, this is gonna be my first time speaking on battle rap. I'm a big battle rap fan. Like I said, that 2000s period, that early 2000s period, DVD, mixtape culture. One of the things I always look forward to was the battles, the hip hop battles. And I know it's pretty much at this point, it's pretty much everywhere, but started off as East Coast, predominantly an East Coast thing to have battles. Those 3 rounds, two guys stand in the ring, say as much crazy stuff as they can to each other. You know what I mean, with the judges and everybody in the crowd. Going crazy over each line. Familiar with Smack DVD, Smack URL battles. I came up on, like I said, Smack DVD. You watch the DVD, then you got to the end of the battle. You got to the end of the DVD, and you watch the battle. And you see two guys that battled everywhere, battled everyone, just do battle. Like I said, usually 3 rounds. Um, the best battles used to have extensive rounds as well back in the early days. You know what I mean? Like I said, DVD days, before online culture, before the internet, and before comment culture, and um, all the different metrics that came into it. Battle rap is still prevalent. I always feel like battle rap kind of has these lulls. You know what I mean? Like it kind of has a lull in there where it's like it's booming, but then it also hits a little bit of a lull, or just not as good as the peak period. I feel like around 2003 to about 2007, 2008, maybe throughout the whole 2000s. I mean, battle rap was real at a strong peak, real strong peak. You had some really great battlers. Like I said, going from the DVDs, the internet, YouTube culture came in around that time. Really elevated the new heights. And then the mid 2010s was pretty good too. I do think like certain things have kind of watered down hip battle rap a little bit. So I just wanted to take a time to look back at battle rap. And one of the things I saw was a post that had the Mount Rushmore of battle rap. And honestly, here's a reason why I can't really disagree with this one. I've seen different variations. I've seen some with Tay Rock on there. I've seen some with um, T Rex. I've seen some early ones on there. But to me, these are the ones that made the most early impact in battle rap to me. And like I always like a Mount Rushmore to be kind of more historic, more so than just who's the best at it. Because, Mount Rushmore, the idea of it is kind of like a founding fathers, or, the ones who got the ball rolling. Like when they had the golden era of hip hop, the Mount Rushmore. I like when KRS One, Rakim, and Big Daddy Kane and everybody else is the Mount Rushmore of that one, because it's like kind of like almost a founding fathers type of theme. Um, this one right here makes sense to me because you had Loaded Lux, you had Murder Mook, going left to right, Murder Mook and Loaded Lux for those who don't know. But yeah, two of the fiercest, both from Harlem. Both had the what I would like to call the Illmatic of hip hop rap battles. Had one right there in the clothing store, Smack DVD. You can find that online, Loaded Lux and Murder Mook. Though that battle right there kind of set it off for battle rap culture to me. You know what I mean? I think like once that was filmed, recorded, and everyone around got a chance of battle rap culture right there on the DVD underground circuit. Fight Club on MTV2 also had some good battlers as well. Before that, Fight Club, they had Serious Jones, they had Jen from Rough Riders, who was also on. A lot of people think about 106 in Park when they think about rap battles and stuff. I don't really consider it, even though a lot of I seen a lot of people get exposure on there. Loda Lux was on 106 in Park before. Hell from Dipset, as I mentioned earlier, he was on 106 in Park before as well. You get some quick exposure, but it's not like it's respectable as a real battle league. And Loda Lux, like I said, the second one from the left. Um, he had a Lions Den where he had a circuit of showcasing battlers as well, and he was kind of hosting, even though he was the best one there. But yeah, him and Murder Mook had a classic. Definitely put it down. New York City battlers. You also had Jay Mills, who was coming up big at that time. Like I said, Sirius Jones from Jersey. He's also an honorable mention as well. But Arsenal from Jersey, the one with the dreads on the second to the right. I mean, the second one to the far right. Um, He's actually one of the original Jersey ones as well. Did a whole bunch of battles over his long career. A lot of all four of these guys have been battling forever. They all been battling forever. A Verb from St. Louis. Um, I have a hard time thinking about removing A Verb because he put it down for St. Louis when nobody knew anything about St. Louis battling. Like he was one of the original OG battlers from St. Louis, and he came to New York City, came to New York from St. Louis, rapping, ready to go at anybody. And I just have a big respect for A Verb, just for being one of those original, bricklayers for St. Louis battle rap culture, as far as putting it out there for everybody to see. Because battle rap is not just New York; it's still Philly, it's still Jersey. Every respect to them, Detroit, St. Louis, Cali now. It's across the board now. But I mean, when those talk about those key cities, those cities that really got it off the ground, A Verb really, to me, just as much as anybody, because with the other three, there's plenty of other battlers that came before them. You know what I mean? But as far as putting it on camera, opening up battle leagues and evolving battle rap to what it is now, these are pretty much the pivotal four. St. Louis, you really didn't know much battling before A Verb. And I got to put him up there for that, you know. So I don't really have a problem with this four right here. Lux, Mook, I'm not moving them. Like I said, their battle pretty much set battle rap off as far as DVD culture, as far as some sort of broadcasting of battling. Took it to another level. Like I said, there was MTV2 before that and Fight Club, but this one, Smack DVD, felt like the real beast went at it. Eventually evolved into URL, Smack League, Smack, the league. Um, Arsenal, like I said, he had plenty of battles, plenty of classic battles. You had Tay Rod from Baltimore. There's plenty of honorable mentions. Like I said, this is the first mini talks I'm gonna have about battle rap. I'm gonna get deeper into it. So, if you already hip to it, give you something to look forward to. If you really wasn't big on battle rap but interested in getting into it, here's a chance to catch up on it. You know what I'm saying? I'll put you on. Like I said, the Charlie Clips, people you see on Wild and Out and everything like that. Charlie Clips came up. He was a heavily respected battle rapper. Conceited as well. He was a battle rapper as well. That's the best of the cat. Oh man. My man Loda Lux though, man. Listen, Loda Lux, Loda Lux and Murder Mook, they were so well known from battles that they got record deals in the mid 2000s. Murder Mook had got signed to Rough Riders. Loda Lux had got signed. A lot of times battle rappers don't necessarily make that jump into actually being an artist. But, as far as their battle rap resume is impeccable. They didn't win against the best, win at the best, gave their best, gave some classic rounds. Um, like I said, this is just the first of many. This is just a brief foray into it. Like I said, I seen the Mount Rushmore up there. Thought it was interesting to look at, and just kind of give you a brief overview into battle rap before we get further deeper into it as these episodes progress. But yeah, that's my time for the evening. And all. Thank you all for jumping on. I appreciate it. I'll be back on Wednesday, 9 p.m. discussing sports. NBA playoffs still going strong, getting ready for the NBA finals. I'll be back next Saturday, 10 p.m., discussing more hip hop. Like I said, this is just a foray into to battle rap. I'm have more discussions about the mixtape circuit with the DJs and their projects that they've done. Further deeper and dive into it. Got some more albums to revisit as well, more nostalgia. And then I'll be on top of more new releases and any other fun stuff, clickbait, anything to have a good laugh about as well. Like I said, you catch the replays and comment, share, tell a friend, and tell a friend as well. Like I said, it's the Left Fresh Podcast. Thank you all for jumping on. Enjoy your Memorial Day weekend. All have a good night.